So we are tens, and that's why we are the Ex-Newmys. The acronym is TENS. The Ex-Newmys, because like I said, we are tens. Your birthday is on the 10th of the month. Mine is 10th of the month. That is cycle complete. We have one son, Jerry Newmy the third. He's supposed to do amazing things, and like I've always told him, he have the best of both of us. And even if it's just not him, the things that we supposed to help to fix to move both of our families forward, the Newmy family and the Foster family, to move our families forward, is we have things that we have to do. So that's why we're here. So when it came to our healing journey, like I'm going to start this segment off by talking about I remember your healing journey. Part of it. I remember when you called me when you were retiring from the military. And so this was 2014 or so, 2015. When did you retire? What year?
I'm retired February of 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So around, I don't know, close to the end of 14, the beginning of 15, I remember you called me. At this point, you and I have been divorced for almost 5 years, 4.5, 5 years. Like technically divorced. And I remember you calling me and you were retiring and you just called me and you gave me a piece of your mind. And you were so frustrated because I knew that it was a scary, I didn't know at the time until I faced my own retirement. But I knew that looking back, when I wrote the first book, The Realization of Irrelevance, Finding Your You After the Military, I mentioned that in there about how I remember when you called me and when you were retiring and you was upset with me. And I'm just like, Newmy, we spent 5 years, like, why are you still coming at me? But you were just saying that you was coming to a place in your life and things just didn't look like they weren't solid. Like you didn't know you would be at this point in your life, retiring from the military, you in your 40s, and you were divorced again. So it's like you were going out there and you was feeling all the feelings. And what we don't realize, a lot of people don't realize at the time, unless you go through it, is when you join the military when you're 18, 19, 20 years of age and you're retiring in your 40s, you don't even know who you are. Right. And to do it alone is very, very scary. You know what I mean? And that's what you were going through at that time. And I didn't understand it until I got to my retirement. What does healing after divorce look like? What did it look like? I know what I saw for you looking in, but what were you going through at that moment, at those moments?
There's a lot of things that you go through when you do get a divorce, and you're looking at your life, you're trying to figure out where do you stand. And not only was I leaving the military at that time, but I was not leaving on good terms with the military because I was so frustrated because of the diagnosis with the MS and all that stuff. And I was like, where do you go? I've been married to this thing for 25 years, just like we were married together for 15 years. And at that time, you're looking at your life and you're saying, hey, who's really going to change this diaper on me when I get older? Who's the military kind of kicking you to the curb because of your illness or whatever the case may be. And they're looking at you like, hey, if you can't deploy, you're no good for me. But what about these last 23, 24, 25 years I've given you? And so it's a scary thought. It's a scary feeling. At the time I'd moved into a kind of a relationship, but there was uncertainty there too as well because you just don't know. Everything is still new to you. And you're trying to figure out your place and your identity, your kids, and how much longer you got to live, your mortality. Everything is in question at that time. And it's a real scary place because you don't have the military no more. You don't have Yashika no more in that instance. You're moving on to new things and you're trying to figure out how to navigate that, and the kids have grown up. And the only one who was still dependent on me was BJ to a certain degree, but he was with you at the time. So looking at that, you don't have anybody in the military that depends on you no more. You don't have your kids are grown up and they're going and they're doing their things. You don't have a wife anymore. You do have a situation that you're embarking up on, but you don't know what that situation is going to entail in a full sense. And so you're looking at your life and you feel really lost. And there's so many that's when the suicide rate is so high in the military once guys leave. That's when you see so many guys that die immediately after they leave the military because they just do not have anything to validate themselves anymore, or they don't have family, because a lot of guys get divorced after 20 years. You 20 years in and you like, well, I'm like, that's so foolish. Why would you get divorced now? And they divorce, and then they all struggling. They go take jobs overseas and all this other kind of stuff. But fortunately, though, I've been able to get a grip on what life would look like. You know, I had people like yourself and other friends within my life that came to my aid. Because if you don't have those people to come to your aid, you're going to be in a tough spot. And I was in a tough spot. I've been there several times within my life, and I've been able to call on you. I've been able to call on June and Johns and Scullion and Russell and those guys that's in my life and punk rock that have been able to talk me through different things when it's tough. Because there's that tough element that I do not belong to anything anymore that's greater than myself. My family is gone. The military is gone. Where do I fit in? And that was so hard to make that change. And that change is like, and I think we're not prepared for it. And then you said you went through it a few years after I did, because I retired in 15, you retired in 16 or 17. Mm-hmm. And so you were right behind me. And you look at it too, and you think about it too. That camaraderie, what you have with the military, is just like being married. Mm-hmm. Those people, you know, we bounced around so much, and we was like in different places and deployments and all these things, and all those things come to you.
So was it the military that I mean, because let me understand this right, because when I talk about healing after divorce, you know, our divorce was 5 years prior to you retiring from the military.
Yeah.
You know, and so up in that time frame, I'm just curious, like, how did you, because there were things that, you know, because you talked a lot about the military. Mm-hmm. And to me, like, military was just part of who I was. But another part of who I was, which is a big factor, was I was a wife and a mother.
You were.
And
absolutely.
So for me, I know that I longed for those positions more than I did the military, because granted, divorce was a decision. But the military was almost like, this is for the greater good in the long run. But it's not something I had to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's not something I had to do. It's not something that I prayed to do. It's not something that as a little girl, although I decided at 11 or 12 that I was going to the military, it wasn't one of those things that, because in my mind, a marriage was bigger than anything else, right? A childhood was bigger than anything else. And so for me, even before I retired from the military in 2016, you and I had been divorced 6 years at that point. Mm-hmm. And so that was a bigger loss for me, you know, and I think that in those 6 years, it allowed me, from the time that we divorced and the time that I got out of the military or I chose to retire, it allowed me to kind of get to know myself, you know, in that time frame, because there was things, correct, right. Because I didn't know, like, because I had went from one marriage to the other marriage, right? Mm-hmm. And similar to yourself. And so there wasn't really a long gap between when I was in a serious relationship versus another relationship. So since the time I was 18 with my first husband, I didn't really know who Yashika was, right. You know? And so when we got divorced in 2010, I was 37, going on 38. Right. And so by the time I retired from the military, I was 43. So here I was in another decade in my life. And it was like, okay, who is the 40-year-old Yashika? Who is the 40-year-old Yashika without a hyphenated last name or a different last name than my birth name, right? And that was what I spent those 6 years doing. You know what I mean? Now, granted, once I retired, I had to get to know her because I was a different girl than when I was 18. But when I first joined the military. But that part of me of healing, that was what I had to really, really go through. And that involved a lot of tears. That involved a lot of self-doubt. That involved a lot of trying to understand, trying to, like, what was it about me that he didn't feel was enough? Identity crisis, worthiness, trying to understand my self-worth. And I think that was what I was thankful for those 6 years. Because I think that if I had to do them all at the same time, meaning retire from the military and divorce at the same time, that would have been catastrophic. right? And then not only that, but I had a different focus, because as I was retiring from the military, now I had a 3-year-old that had came into my life when she was 2 weeks old. And so although our boys were of age and our girls were of age, now I had somebody that solely relied on me. Like, she didn't have a father. She didn't have, she didn't know her mother or her father. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm all she had. So I could not afford to keep, like, I have this thing where I'll tell people, and I'm going to say this, that I always tell people that, and I value this in my life, because it's one of those things that I really, really, I think it's helped me. And I always tell people that in the Bible, it only rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And so in life, there's only that much, and I'm going to cry for something. And then after that, I have to keep going. Because if he can rebuild everything in 40 days, clearly I can rebuild this one person. Because he had a lot of entities to worry about.
That's not necessarily true.
Maybe for you.
I'm talking about in general terms of speaking. Everybody's not built the same, and we're not built the same.
I understand that.
And so, and I'm going to speak from a man's point of view, the competitive nature, what the military brought, the camaraderie, what the military brought, the constant being called on and needed. Because men are creatures that need to be needed in order to validate ourselves.
But your divorce was 5 years before your military exit, so I'm just trying to understand.
If you just listen, just give me a minute. I'm going to go back to that. So I equated the military, my marriage to the military, just as well as I equated my marriage to you. It was both like two things. It even still, even when we, because we went through a separation phase before we got divorced, and we was trying to figure out, just let me finish.
I didn't say anything.
You're trying to say something. Because
I never knew we were separated. But go ahead. Because we live in the same household. So how was we? But go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish.
Listen.
Stop
for a second. If I got a place in Barstow, and I'm doing...
Your brother had a place in Barstow.
No, we had that place.
Your brother had a place in Barstow.
Why are we going to argue about what's...
Because we had a 4-bedroom house.
She got a tomato and I got a tomato.
We had our mother and our 4 kids. We had my mother and our 4 kids, and then you and I. So where was your brother going to stay? He's always been with you. So you got him a place in Barstow. So in my mind, your brother had a place in Barstow.
Okay.
In my mind. Now, I know that's when you and your chicks hung out at, but in my mind, and Barstow was 35, 40 minutes from our house because you had to go through the desert to get there. But in my mind, your brother had a house in Barstow. But go ahead. I'm going to let you finish.
So we had this happy marriage all the way through, and then we just got divorced.
No, we did not have a happy marriage.
That's what she wants you to believe.
No, we did not have a marriage. But what I'm saying...
Okay, we don't need to argue about this.
We're not arguing about it, because what I'm trying to explain to you was we were living 2 different lives.
Okay.
And because if I'm still in it, because remember, you got a chance to, and I'm going to say this, you got a chance to have the option to go to Barstow. I did not have that option. I was at home still with your kids that you brought into the relationship, my son that I brought into the relationship, and the overhead of trying to hold down a household. Not to mention the son that we had together. Mm-hmm. So I never had an option. I had to stay there. If I did not stay there, then who was going to take care of the family? So what I'm saying to you is, I did not know that we were living 2 different lives.
Okay, listen. Shanae was already gone.
Jerry, it was still a play, but you got to remember. You got to remember Jerry. Okay, let's come on now.
You want to get one side of the story.
Because come on now, Tweet did not move out until after she graduated high school.
And she graduated in what? 2008?
No, she didn't. Was it 2000? I don't remember what year she graduated.
2008.
But remember, by that time though, Shanae was supposed to come back. Not to mention we had Taz. Not to mention we had BJ. We were still in our house. So in my mind, I was still preparing Sunday dinner. I was still You was still at the house. Don't act like you had moved out. You was still there.
Chica, I would come and go, and you know that.
Jerry, only when you wanted to, you would come and go. Only when you wanted to.
Okay, listen, we're getting all off subject. We're getting all off subject here. We're trying to say, well, how was the situation? And I said, hey, in 2008, there was a separation there. And you can sit there in 2008 now. And then when I came back to you in June or July of 2010, before our divorce was final, what did I say to you?
You didn't want us to divorce.
I said, hey.
But if you was moved to Barstow, then wasn't we on the right track? Because if you wanted to get to work, you would have stayed in the house with me instead of taking it to Barstow.
But you were not prepared for that because
No,
you were steady
don't
doing
do
what
that.
you was doing.
You see how
steady doing what you was doing.
How was I doing what I'm doing and I'm stuck in the middle of the desert? You the one that had girls coming to my house. You the one that was taking trips to Las Vegas and coming back in a whole new outfit. And I know for a fact that I was the only one that ever bought your clothes. But remember when you went to Barstow, to Las Vegas, and you come back and you got a whole new outfit, and you came in the house with your hands in your pocket, honey. And I said, oh, so I will never forget that day you came in the house. You came there and I was like, look at you. You come in the house, your chest all stuck out and shit. I said, oh, she did it to you real good, huh?
Why you always got to equate it with a woman?
Because it was the privates or the soldiers that came back and told me.
You said it was over the doggone.
It was over the doggone Christmas vacation, and you told me I had some soldiers that needed a ride to the airport that I told them. I didn't even know you was gone, and you stayed overnight in Vegas, and you come on back the next day with your chest stuck out and a whole new outfit on. I said, look at you, cat daddy. Look at you, cat daddy.
Why you always got to equate things with other women?
Listen, regardless of what happened. Can a man go
make himself feel good about himself?
But you was the one that told, listen, I'm here for it. And I pray to God that that's what you did.
That's exactly what I did.
And I'm here for it if that's what you did. But I also know that I didn't go looking for nothing. But it all came to my doorstep to tell me what went on during that time. I know you don't.
What girl is you
I know you don't. But that's why it's been 15 years, honey. We ain't got to remember it no more.
It's been 15?
It's been 15 years since you and I have been divorced, and it's been about 17, 18 since that incident. We don't have to remember. That was a whole lifetime ago. Yeah, and I'm here I'm here for the growth, but I just want to know about your healing stage of that.
How did we get sidetracked with that? Because you wanted to jump in there and validate something that didn't need no validation.
Well, go ahead and finish then.
So, but with the healing process of it, I don't think you ever actually heal in my mind completely from thinking about, especially when you have kids together, you were trying to build a life together. You do have where you move on, but you still think about those things. You know, if I could have stayed in a situation, or you could have stayed in a situation with what you were in previous to me, and you look at that situation, and you say you had a kid, you had Taz, right? When it would have been great, just listen.
But let me say this. I'm sorry, Jerry, but you and him were like, I never saw us getting old together, me and my first husband.
Why not?
Because I was very stagnant with that relationship, right? And he was dependent on me to take us to the next level while trying to keep a thumb on me. But you weren't like that.
I never was.
You weren't like that.
But listen, just listen to the scenario, right? Sometimes when y'all are high school, and I'm speaking from me. When you're in high school, you don't know nothing.
You don't.
And so you're going into it together with no knowledge of how to be a wife or a husband, or how to be a man or a woman. You are growing. And sometimes you grew way faster than him. But was it not your obligation to go back and say, hey, let me see where you're at in your mind so we can build together?
Of course, and not to bring that relationship into
it. But it's important.
But you remember, though.
It's important for the young folks.
Absolutely. But what happened with that relationship was, for me, I even said I'm willing to forget all the things that was going on in terms of bad things. That was a lot of things. Right? What you said. But what did it for me was when I got deployed to Bosnia, and I volunteered to deploy in Bosnia. I extended a fourth year in Germany to deploy to Bosnia because he knew we had two goals. Well, we said we had two goals, which was to buy a car before we left Germany and to buy a house once we got to the States. Right. Because we had Taz. And at this point, Taz was a year old when I got deployed to Bosnia. And so the year was 1996. So as soon as I hit the ground in Bosnia, he started taking my money from the beginning. And so for me, that was one of those. So when I came back, even I was almost taken out while I was there because me getting my head stuck between two vehicles. And for me to come home and I don't have no money.
You wouldn't have had that Kevlar on.
If I hadn't had that Kevlar on, absolutely. You understand what I'm saying? But it was just one of those things. I've been through all this and you don't know what all my money gone. It was like, what was it for? Now, did I come back and that's when I met you during that time. It's in that transition space. Right. And, And so did I still buy the BMW before I left Germany?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes,
and then you and I worked together, and at 27, I was able to buy the first house. We were able to buy the first house together. We weren't married at that time, but I knew that. But two things I knew in mind. While we were together, because we didn't know what that relationship was going to look like, because we had lived in an apartment first, and then we bought the house in 1997, or excuse me, 2000. 2000. And so I knew that while you were there, I was going to maximize, because I didn't know what it was going to look like.
Right.
We both had been through situations and coming out of divorces.
Right.
And so, but what I also knew was that I could afford that mortgage with or without you.
Yeah.
And that was something that I told you. I got to make sure, because I don't know what this is going to go. Later on that year, in October, we got married. That 2000, after we built the house in June, or the house was finalized in June, and we got married that October. And so that was how I looked at life, you know. And so with my first situationship, or my first husband, my first marriage, that's why I knew that it was too, like, I knew neither one of, because we all came from the hood. You from by way of Chicago, Arkansas. I'm from Detroit. My first husband from Detroit. So I knew that we didn't have really, really good examples of trying to do it all.
Right.
You know, in terms of having careers and family. It was like one or the other when it came to the woman.
So what I'm saying, though, is this, right? Nobody had the blueprint because we didn't see the blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
You
but
see
I
what I'm
knew
saying?
when
I saw it
was
with my
against
grandparents.
me. But I understood. Here's what I understood as a young woman, and I say this clearly. Even when it came to our relationship and any relationship I had before or after, in my mind, I feel that I'm holding that person back from being their best self. And I really feel that way. So for me, even with my first husband, right, I'm not, apparently it's some stuff you want to do without me. Let you go ahead and do it, because this is not working for me. Same thing with you. Like, in my mind, right, and I mean this with everything in me, because remember, when I first got out of a relationship, I questioned everything about myself. So I wasn't good enough for you.
So let's take a look at that. For me, and I'm telling you this, and I've said this to you before, whatever I did within that relationship, I did it for my own selfish reasons and my greed. It had nothing to do with you as a woman. Mm-hmm. And I told you that. Mm-hmm. You were an outstanding wife, you were a great mother, and you handled our shit really well when it came down to the business, the finances of our household. Hell, when you left, I couldn't even figure out how to write a damn check because I didn't know nothing about it. When you left, I was like, damn, how do I handle a bill?
But when you have people, like, and I say this out of, like, for real, I don't, there's no malice when I say this. Even your current wife, I remember telling her, if I knew you can get the ring and you didn't have to do all that, I wouldn't have done all the things I did, because in my mind, I was tired. In my mind, I was burnt out. In my mind, I was being too much.
Do all what?
Cooking, cleaning, taking, like, you know me, you already know I don't have to give it up. In other words, me trying to balance being a wife, a mother, a soldier, a student, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and all those things, right? And not to mention, when people come into our house, they would be like, y'all got a nice house. Our kids were on routines. No matter if I only had a few hours to myself at nighttime. When we would come home, you already know how it was when I went to bed, and how no matter if we were arguing or not, I still fixed your plate, because these are the things that I saw my grandmother do.
I had no issues.
But I was still working 15 hours a day. I was still trying to do these things. So in my mind, when I see other people not having to do all this, and I'm just like, well, somebody told me wrong. And here's the thing, I'm not saying that it is wrong, because now at 51, I understand life. But in that moment, because you got to remember, when you and I divorced, I was 38. Mm-hmm. Right? I had been divorced the second time at that point. So in my mind, I'm doing too, like, that's not how, like, I'm not supposed, like, somebody, like, maybe I need to be a damsel in distress. Right? Maybe I need to be where I need somebody instead of wanting somebody.
So, Chick, I think two things can be right
true at the same time.
Correct or true at the same time. I think in your mind, and you thought this was everything right, but if you can remember, I appreciated every meal you cooked.
But what would you tell me about the meal?
I would say.
Well, your caveat was, I don't ask you to cook. I don't. So in my mind, you can take it or leave it because you was saying to me, but you did though, Jerry. You was like, I don't ask you to cook. You cook because you want to cook. I don't ask you to cook. And I'm like, well, damn, Jerry, but I thought I was supposed to cook.
Time out. Why are you throwing that out there like I was like, I ain't actually
because you, that's
I never came off like that. You got to stop.
It to me.
It's your tone of what you're saying, and that makes it look messed up.
But what I'm saying to you is that you were telling me that you could take it or leave it. Is what I got.
Listen to what I'm saying to you.
Remember, we were 38 something. We were 30 something back then. At 50, we processed things different.
Stop.
The way I took it was. It didn't make you a difference. What I did.
No, what I was trying to tell you, and I said it with less of that, all that nonchalant stuff, what you're kicking out there. Hey, see, you don't have to cook like that. This is the reason why. I don't expect that. I can go get these kids some Popeye's chicken and have you something ready, and period. That's how I said it.
That's how you
but
said
when
it.
you saying it like, yeah, I don't expect, no.
No, you said it like that. You were saying to me.
You got to look at I was in a more caring mode because
but the way I took it, especially when, and like I would tell you, there were things like, especially on Sundays, that was my big thing.
That was a big thing for us. Sunday, we had a great Sunday dinner.
Right,
and I mean, every Sunday it was that way.
Right, and so in my mind,
no matter what you had going on,
in my mind, I wanted to keep some of the traditions.
Right.
That I mean, you're more from the South than I am, but again, I have grandparents that were from the South.
So let me tell you.
So for me, I thought that no matter what life did, I had to have just a little bit more energy to make sure that if I don't cook for my family the rest of the week, let me at least cook on a Sunday.
On a Sunday. So let's take a look at that. I saw my grandmother. My grandmother. When I moved down south, she would cook me breakfast, and I would have a hot meal almost every single night. Mm-hmm. Every single night. But I looked at her, and I appreciated it. And I used to tell her, I said, Mama, I really appreciate you cooking, but you don't have to do that all the time for me.
I get it.
You know what I'm saying? Because I could see how she would go in and wash my granddaddy's shirts on her hand and make sure his stuff was ironed for church every single Sunday. And if he sit at the table and he would hit, and I didn't want that for her. Right. And I didn't want that for my wife.
You didn't want that for me. I
didn't want that for my wife.
And
you know, and I look at my wife now. I don't want that for her either. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like you don't have to slave for me and worship me like that. Because I want you to be, just chill.
Right, and I get it.
And one of the greatest things.
We didn't have the words back then to communicate that to each other effectively. I'm going to tell you because in my mind, I took it like, you doing that because you want to do it. I'm like, wait a minute, this is how I show, because, the mamas, the grandmamas, the whoever, they show love through cooking.
Through cooking,
And so that was part of me showing love. Like,
but a lot of times I'd be like, hey, let's just go out to eat when we had. I remember one time we couldn't go out to eat, our money was tight. And you took that box and you said, I would never ever be like that again in my life. Remember that?
The $10.
And that $10. And she took $10 and put it in a box. I was never a big saver, but I would contribute and give money and stuff. But she was saved and she's put that money back. And I remember we was too young to eat fives then. You said, I would never, ever, you wanted some Red Lobster.
I wanted some Red Lobster.
She wanted it bad. And we didn't have money. We had
about a week left before payday, and we didn't have money. And I was like, wait a minute, how is it that we both have jobs, we work for the government, we done been deployed I don't know how many times, and we can't go to Red Lobster? I said, this will never happen again. I had $10 in my purse, and
you took
I
that last $10
put it inside of a sandwich bag.
No, you put it inside a shoebox.
Okay, and I said, every time I get a $10 bill, I'm going to put it in here. And so whenever I would break a 20 or 50 or 100, and if I would get a $10 back, I would put that $10 inside of that object. And then that way I was like, so if we want to go to whatever restaurant, this is our bag. And so it was never, we never had an issue after then.
You see, this is the part where people miss. And this is where we could have worked on things. Just that little thing.
Right.
You can build a mountain out of that.
Right.
Just like we always can build a mountain out of the negative stuff, you can build a mountain out of just those little things and continue to be great. But what we stop doing, we stop seeing the greatness in the little things, and we always wanted something bigger and better. If we could have stuck right there and just kept on with the little things, we could have made it through.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
I get that.
Just that simple.